Welcome. My name is Connor Brumley. I currently serve as the president of the College Democrats of Kentucky, and we are so excited to have you here at the University of Kentucky for the first ever bunch of the 6 congressional candidates for the 6th Congressional Democratic Primary Forum. And we're so excited to have you here today. As you all know, there's never been a time more pressing than this for young people to get involved. 2026 is counting on young people to organize, mobilize, and that's just some of the work that College Democrats of Kentucky are doing across the Commonwealth in all of our congressional districts. But tonight, we get to spend a little bit of time with some fantastic candidates who are going to be our next Congress people, defeating the terrible candidates on the other side, so we can actually have good representation in Congress and people who will fight for the needs that care most to Kentuckians. And so tonight you'll be able to hear from 4 incredible candidates who are going to introduce themselves throughout the evening and answer some of the most challenging questions as it pertains to what youth want to know when it comes to this election. So before we get kicked off, I'm going to pass it to our representative from the Executive Board of the University of Kentucky Democrats to welcome us to campus, with that being Ariana.
Hello everyone, we're so happy that you guys came. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. We're so happy that we're hosting this here at UK. This was definitely our first big event like this, so thank you guys for taking time. Hopefully you guys will get to hear some great and insightful things and ask loads of questions at the end, so I'll let you guys take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Koenig. I am the Deputy Director of Programming here at CDKY. Thank you again for being here this evening. To give you a bit of a run of show, how we're going to do things tonight is each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves to you all. We'll then move into an individual candidate question period. They'll each field 3 policy questions, one that pertains to their campaign and another that pertains more specifically to an issue. After that, we'll field 3 audience questions, so fill out that QR code. So that Connor can help filter out the questions that we're going to get and ask them. And then we will do a concluding statement from our candidates. So our order for introductions will be Aaron, David, Zach, and then Sherilyn. So Aaron, if you want to come start, you can come up to the podium if you want.
Yeah, it was like, do you want to do the podium? Go here? Where do you want to be? I can do whatever you want me to do. So, hey everyone, my name is Erin Petrie. And it's great to be in this room because I was born just a few blocks from here. I'm a proud graduate of Fayette County Public Schools, and I also got my master's degree just across the way at the Patterson School of Diplomacy here at the University of Kentucky. Caroline, thank you so much for being our moderator tonight. Thank you, Connor, and everybody with the College Democrats for organizing this forum, and thanks to every one of you for being here, interested, and engaged in this vital process. Now, I'm someone who has led a very diverse career, but my career has always been rooted in one common theme, and that is tackling big problems and delivering real solutions. I've deployed billions of dollars in critical infrastructure like renewable energy capacity, manufacturing facilities, ports, and everything in between that makes our country run. I've negotiated trade treaties, I've managed foreign policy for embassies, and I've created hundreds of jobs in dozens of states. And that's exactly what I want to do here. See, I'm running because the Democratic Party needs a new direction, a new leader, a new voice. And now is especially the time that we need to not just push back on Trump, but also on our own leadership and get our own house in order. Because we weren't the party we needed to be before. But we need to be the party that gets us out of this. And my campaign is fully focused on serving each and every one of you. Because people want leaders who are transparent, who lead with authenticity and honesty. And that's why I have committed to not taking any corporate money and why I'm not working with any billionaire donors. Because billionaires, let's be real, they got us into this mess in the first place. Which is also why I'm committed to doing things like passing sweeping campaign finance reform. My entire campaign is based on 3 main things: affordability, access, and opportunity. Because we know things are too expensive. But just because we deal with the price doesn't mean that we can still access it. I want to make sure that people can access the things they need, from housing to healthcare to education, regardless of their identifying factors, what their gender was at birth, or what color their skin is or what their religion is. But it's also about opportunity, because we all want a brighter future. Jobs, new energy capacity, and a place where democracy works for all of us, not just the few. Because for me, I'm all about making the American dream the American reality again. I'm Erin Petrie, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you so much.
Next, we'll have David Kloiber.
Jeremy's carrying.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is David Kloiber. I am running for the same seat that we all are. This is the 6th Congressional House seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Thank you all for being out here tonight. I know it's not always easy to get out and take time to talk to people, but it's conversations like this that actually move the needle. Because what you hear tonight, you can take out and talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family members if you are so brave. But I'm just saying, these are the conversations that actually make things work. And that's what my entire campaign is about. My campaign is about how we make things work. But let me step back and tell you a little bit about myself and how I've been doing that for a few years. So I grew up here in Lexington. I went to UK. We didn't have anything near as nice as this whole student center when I was here. Instead, I was in the old Hagen Hall, and I ate at K-Lear almost every single day. So you guys probably know a little bit about that. But I left school in order to start up a software company, went to Florida, chased a girl down there. I convinced her to marry me, and brought her right back here to start a family. Because whether you know it or not, Lexington's a very special place where you can raise a family and expect great outcomes in the future. That's what we have today, and that's what I'm hoping that we will have in the future. But it's going to take a lot of work. So, I've been a businessman for many years. That's what I do for a living. I invest in companies, I build them up. I try and make sure these companies are good for the communities they're in, that we're making new jobs. We have entry-level positions that actually are entry-level positions, not just you needed to intern for 3 years before you could get a good paying job. I've been starting a nonprofit and working with education and technology throughout all of Central Kentucky. This means making sure our kids have the tools they need so that when they get out in the real world, they know what they're dealing with. I've also served on Fayette County's urban county government. This means I was on the council back during COVID. It was a not unexpected time to be there, but we got a lot of good experience working to try and rebuild a community after a catastrophe, not too dissimilar to what we're facing as a nation. So here I am, and here's my pitch. I got 1 minute. My pitch is for common sense for the Commonwealth. I'm committed to making sure we have real plans that can get passed and that can make a difference. This means I focus on 3 primary areas of affordability. This is healthcare, housing, and jobs. And I hope to have a conversation here tonight to tell you about exactly how I plan to get it on day 1, put these things in committee, and make a real difference in your life in the first 2 years in office. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Zach Dembo now.
I think it's on here. It's close to the button.
Hello. Good evening, y'all. My name is Zach Dembo, and I'm running for the honor of being your congressman. Let me thank the College Democrats in UK for hosting. As we begin this election cycle in earnest, it means a lot being here. This is an institution that's very important to my family. My mother grew up on a small farm in rural Kentucky and was the first in her family to go to college, and she went right here. Part of that is because I'm told my grandfather said if she went to the other school, he'd disown her. So, good choice on her part. But what I would say is this school gave my family a lot of the success we've been able to have. And not only that, but then my father spent his entire career here on campus. And so it's an honor to be here with you tonight. I'm running to be your congressman for 2 reasons. First, the country is in crisis. Chaos is coming out of DC, and the only folks benefiting from that chaos are the rich, the powerful, and corporations. They are getting more and more, and all of us here are getting less and less. Second, it's clear that politics as usual, that career politicians, that the generations that got us into this mess are not going to be the way we get out of this mess. We need new faces, new ideas, and new leadership, which is why I'm putting my name on the ballot for the very first time in my life. While I may be a first-time candidate, standing up to the rich and powerful and fighting for folks has been a lifelong passion of mine. When I graduated college, I joined Teach for America and taught 8th grade English in the rural Mississippi Delta. And every day I stood up and fought so that my students could get the education that they deserved. When I graduated law school, I had commissioned as an officer in the United States Navy and was on active duty as a JAG, or a uniformed lawyer. In that capacity, I stood up and fought every day for my fellow sailors and Marines. When I came home, I served on the senior staff of Governor Andy Beshear and fought for all of my fellow Kentuckians as part of Team Kentucky. And when I took the last job I thought I would ever need as a federal prosecutor right here in my hometown of Lexington, I stood up and fought for victims of crime and for justice. But when this administration came in and started using that department that I loved so much to fight for the rich and powerful instead of against them, when they used it to enable corruption instead of serving us, my principles only left me one decision, which was to resign. But I didn't want that to be the end of my public service. I didn't want that to be the end of standing up and fighting for my friends, neighbors, and family here in Central Kentucky. And so that's why I'm in this race, to continue this mission and to fight for all of you in DC. I look forward to this evening with y'all.
Round of applause.
Well, I am going to the podium because I have notes, because I'm very long-winded, and they only gave us 3 minutes. So in order to respect your time, I'm going to stand over here really quickly. First thing that I want you all to know about me is that I fight without fear. I learned that growing up in Eastern Kentucky, where people did not ask for permission to stand up for their neighbors, and where they knew, and you learned very early, that if you wanted something to change, then you had to show up and you had to do the work yourself. My name is Sherilyn Stevenson, and I'm a lifelong Kentuckian. I'm a former small business owner, and I am a Mountain Democrat who has spent my career listening first, because real leadership does not start with talking points. It starts with people. I'm running for Congress because too many families, too many people, especially young people, feel like the basics of a good life are just slipping away. The cost of housing, the cost of healthcare, the cost of higher education, and feeling like no matter how hard you work, the system is just not made for you. I've seen what happens when government actually listens to the people. As a House leader in the General Assembly, I worked with Governor Beshear to reach across the aisle to expand access to health care, to strengthen our public schools, and to pass medical marijuana. Because our families needed relief, not excuses. The wins that we had there didn't come from shouting. They came from persistence and partnership and not being afraid of a really hard fight. Right now, we are living in a moment where democracy itself feels fragile. And young voters are being told that your voices don't matter. Or even worse, that politics are something to tune out. And I do not believe that. You're just tired of leaders that are talking at you instead of with you. And I know that because one of the very first campaign events that I stood up was with a group of college students and recent college graduates. And I heard those concerns and their fears in their voices, but I also heard hope. Hope that a leader was ready to emerge and stand up to fight for them without fear. I am that fighter, and I am running to bring common sense, people-first leadership to Washington. Leadership that's rooted in listening, grounded in real life, and brave enough to take on the millionaires and billionaires who profit from keeping things broken. This campaign is about building a future for staying in Kentucky, building a life here, and believing that our democracy is worth it. Isn't just an act of courage, it's just common sense.
Thank you. Amazing job. Thank you so much again for being here. It's truly awesome to be able to coordinate so that we can all be in the same room tonight to hear these wonderful thoughts as we all become informed voters and participate in the wonderful democratic process that we have. So for this next section, again, like we said, The candidates are going to receive 3 policy questions. Our topics tonight are affordability, higher education, and immigration. And then they will receive 2 specific questions for themselves. The order for these candidate questions will go as David Kloiber, Sherilyn Stevenson, Aaron Petrie, and Zach Dembo. So we'll start with you, 10 minutes for the next one. Okay. So can we give him the mic?
I'm sorry. I was
That's 5
warming it
seconds.
up for you. Oh, I turned it off.
Okay. So your first question is affordability. Although Trump cannot fathom affordability, college students everywhere are feeling the impacts of a turbulent economy. That said, what does affordability look like to you for young people?
Well, the very first thing is that you gotta get a job, right? There have to be jobs available, and there have to be people who are willing to pay you what you're worth. You're putting in the time and effort to get out there and start your own. My kids are 14 and 16 years old, so they're not too far behind you all, and I wanna make sure that the world is set up and ready for them to take hold of it, and they don't have to struggle just to get into an entry-level position. To speak to that, I have one main policy that helps with the economy. It incentivizes companies to pay their employees more, meaning that they'll only get those big juicy tax breaks and all those big profits their shareholders need if they actually pay a living wage. This is a common sense solution. It's something that we can push through, put in committee, and get done in a relatively quick time, because we're talking about making businesses more profitable and paying people more money. That's a bipartisan issue all across the board. So when I'm talking about affordability, the very first thing on top of mind has to be more money in your pockets, more stability, more jobs. We can talk about how to reduce costs of healthcare, which is, again, tied to employment when it shouldn't be. We can talk about reducing the cost of housing, which, as we all know here, for both rent and first-time home buyers, is completely out of control. And in each case, I have bills that I'll propose that will be able to be put into committee almost immediately upon arrival, and will reduce those costs across the board by either getting us the healthcare we've already paid for through grants and subsidies, or making sure that our housing costs go down by incentivizing developers to build what we need. At the end of the day, we have to have real solutions. We all feel these problems, we all feel this pinch on affordability, but we need to have real solutions that are actionable, not just a desire to see a difference. And that's what I'm hoping to give you something to vote for instead of something to vote against.
Awesome. We'll move on to the next one. Higher education institutions across the United States have been found in the crosshairs of the current administration as it pertains to freedom of speech and diversity, equity, and inclusion. This includes the University of Kentucky, the largest public institution in your district, and they're being sued by the Trump administration for unsubstantiated claims of violating the Civil Rights Act, which has triggered a wave of changes across the student experience. What measures should be taken to protect our students' rights and their ability to flourish in their academic endeavors?
So you guys may or may not be familiar with the origins of tenure and why teachers were originally given tenure, especially at these kind of institutions of learning. And the concept was, we need these people to be able to speak their mind freely so that we can get a robust education for our youth. All right? This general concept has been with us since the beginnings of the university system, not just in America, but around the world. This concept that we need to be able to speak freely to one another in order to grow. All right? We do not create the best ideas in isolation. We do not sit in a sounding room and hear our same ideas back at us and actually have progressive growth. We absolutely need to make sure that that is protected. And when we see attacks on these institutions, we have to say to ourselves, how do we put up the guardrails? Remember, it's that how question again. How do we put up guardrails? And the answer is quite clear. Congress can pass laws that put guardrails on executive actions. This has to do with their agencies and what their agencies are going to be citing people for and causing fines for. It also allows us to put guardrails on how the DOJ actually enforces these laws. This is the structure we need in Washington, a structure that looks at those guardrails and says exactly how we get it done. It's one of the primary reasons that when I can get into Congress, I want to get onto the Rules Committee. Because while it's often overlooked as a committee, it's one of the most important to make sure we get those guardrails back in place.
Speaking of guardrails, recent federal operations like the ICE surge in Minneapolis which involved thousands of ICE agents and incidents that left residents fearing for their safety, raised questions about federal overreach. How should Congress reform immigration enforcement to balance public safety, protect civil liberties, and maintain trust in communities, including college campuses?
So one of the things I'm sure everyone is hearing is defund ICE, or that we need to deal with the funding of these organizations. And I personally say that's probably looking a little too small. The entire DHS was created after 9/11, and it took pieces of what the FBI did and pieces of what the CIA did, and it created this amalgamation that has allowed, through the Patriot Act and its expansive use, to create what we're seeing today. All right? That needs to be completely overhauled. We don't necessarily need that operation. So instead of talking about specifically needing to have a full Department of Homeland Security, we should be talking about doing what's best for our people with as little bureaucracy as possible and cutting back on the funding to these kind of programs that we've seen run amok. All right? Specifically for immigration, I have one policy that I'd like to put out here for you guys. It's something that I worked with some of the members of local organizations like Neighbors in order to come up with. It's this concept that we get tied up in the courts for way too long, even when we've done everything right trying to immigrate to the country. I've had friends who have immigrated, it took them over a decade to actually get full naturalization, all right? This is a failure on our part to process them, and they shouldn't be penalized for that. So my proposal is to put in place a statute of limitations that affects us. This means if you put in all the paperwork, if you did everything correctly, we now have a time limit to naturalize you. And if we get you caught up in the courts, you're gonna automatically meet that threshold. This will remove pressure on our courts, remove pressure on our communities, and allow for people to actually have a pathway here. And it's, again, one of those how answers.
Okay, that concludes the policy-specific questions. Let's talk about common sense. You brought up common sense in your introduction, so we wanted to ask you, your campaign slogan is common sense for the Commonwealth. Can you elaborate on what these common sense Kentucky values are, and if elected, how would they benefit your constituents?
So, when I was in kindergarten, I was told I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. And while I don't always follow along with the advice of my teacher to listen twice as much as I speak, it is part of the core of a common sense value for a representative. We need to be listening to what your problem is. I haven't lived your life, but you have. You're the expert of your own issues, and you need to be treated as such. The core of common sense is to listen, accept, and solve. And that last part's a really hard one for politicians because we got big problems and we mostly want to talk about what we stand for, what we believe. And while it's really important to tell people the why, tell people the what, it's just as important to tell people the how. Because, I can't build an IKEA, end table without the directions. All right, I'll end up with too many pieces left over. We can't expect to get ourselves out of the problems we see ourselves in without a roadmap and a plan. So common sense says, work with the community, build a plan, and enact it. And that's the only way we're going to get real change.
Okay, let's go back to housing that you previously mentioned. The median age of a first-time home buyer is at an all-time high of, drumroll, 40. For comparison, since the 1980s, that median age has rested around 30 to 33, 35 once. What policies should be implemented to help our generation move out of our parents' basements and have the same mobility our parents and grandparents once did?
All right, so this can get more technical, and we can talk all about 1031 exchanges, and we can talk about the tax code that allows developers to build what they're going to have the most profit doing, which isn't necessarily what we need. Because when I want to get you guys into a first-time home, there needs to be enough capacity in the community. It needs to be priced in a way that you can afford, and the financing needs to be available. So the policy that I have to put forth pushes developers to build what we need. It says, you guys are going to defer paying tax on this forever. When you build something, you're going to come in, you're going to build it, you're going to sell it and leave the community, and that might not be what we need. Well, this policy is going to say, if you build what we need, a qualified investment, we're going to let you keep some of those tax dollars, which makes them more profitable and drives them to do exactly what we want. The more they build what we need, more affordable housing, more single-family homes, more of the kind of housing that first-time homebuyers need, that's going to solve our issue. More capacity, lower cost, and the ability to lower that rate from what we said was 40 years old for first time, back down to 30s, hopefully into the 20s. I'd like to see it go in the other direction. All right,
Thank you so much. That's all your questions.
that's all my questions. Thank you guys.
You did great. Okay, Sherilyn, are we ready? I'll make sure Connor's ready to time. Connor's timing for us.
You're doing a great job. This is super helpful.
Indeed. Okay, we're gonna go back to the affordability question. I can repeat it for you, would you like?
Please do.
Absolutely. Although Trump cannot fathom affordability, college students everywhere are feeling the impact of a turbulent economy. That said, what does affordability look like to you for young people?
Well, for young people, I believe that affordability is really a question about freedom, right? You need the freedom to get out and make choices on your own. But unfortunately, right now, the government should be helping you as you start a life, but they're putting up a lot of roadblocks to be sure that that happens. Far too many of you are coming out of college just absolutely saddled with debt. And I know this, statistics tell us this, but one of the very first things that I did was to have a roundtable with young people, and I heard that over and over. I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to afford to buy a house. And so first and foremost, we have to fix what's wrong with college loans, and that is high interest rates. So I would be absolutely in favor of 0 to low interest, so that we can be sure that folks are coming out and you're not already paying a mortgage payment when you pay your student loans. So that would allow you then to have more freedom to afford rent, to afford groceries, and to afford health care. Because let's face it, when you're paying rent, and you're paying for your health care, and you're paying for your phone, and you've got food and a car, that's probably about all that you're gonna get. My very first job paid me $24,000. And I know that was, it was huge, and it was a long time before I could afford a house, but I was super lucky. My parents were able to cover my college, and I came out without any loans. And a big part of that is, used to be the state would put in 80% and you were left with 20, and now that is completely upside down. So we need to be investing in education in a lot more ways, because that needs to be cheaper, and that's going to afford you the economic freedom that you need when you get out of college to then be able to afford all of these other things. But another thing that we have to do is we've got to attack tariffs and get those down, because it is making everything more expensive, from housing to hamburger.
Okay, you mentioned college. Higher education institutions across the United States have been found in the crosshairs of the administration when it comes to free speech and DEI. This includes UK, as I mentioned. What measures should be taken to protect our students' rights and their ability to flourish on their academic endeavors?
Well, first and foremost, free speech never started with silencing students or faculty. So that is first and foremost something that is part of your First Amendment rights. So let's get that straight first and foremost. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is absolutely something that we need to continue to value on college campuses, even when folks are telling us that we can't. Because let's face it, unless you're a rich white man, you face adversity every single day. And every single student that comes to a university or a college deserves to feel welcomed and valued and safe. That, to me, is exactly what coming to a college or a university is about. It's to expand your worldview, to put you in touch with people that have different viewpoints than you did. And that will challenge you, and to learn to think critically about things. So when we have a government that is trying to hold colleges and universities hostage over this issue, it means that we need to have a Congress that is an independent body, because we know that they are a co-equal branch, and we need to be exerting ourselves as such, because we have these issues that are really, really important, and young people are going to fall further and further behind if we have this kind of oppression on our college campuses. I'm also really worried about the way that they're holding research dollars hostage. When we're talking about cancer research, things like that, that doesn't just affect the people at the university, that affects all of us worldwide.
Okay, immigration. As we talked about, there's been the ICE search happening in Minneapolis, which has raised questions about public safety and federal overreach. How should Congress reform immigration to balance public safety, protect civil liberties, and maintain trust in our communities, including our campuses?
Well, first of all, we need major oversight. We need a major overhaul. We need oversight, we need accountability, and we need investigations into what's happening. We currently have a paramilitary force out and about that is the most well-funded law enforcement unit in the United States. They do not have regular uniforms. They're wearing masks. They don't have to identify themselves. They don't wear identification in any shape, way, or form. And that must change. We absolutely need to get these folks off of our streets and back to the intent that they were created for. None of us want violent criminals here, and we need to be addressing the cartels that are spreading all kinds of drugs and unwelcome, unsavory things here in our communities. But every single person deserves to feel safe in their community. And right now, the actions of ICE are not making anyone safer. When we see them dragging grandpas in their underwear out in the cold, when we see them leaving 5-year-olds in bunny ear hats by themselves after a parent has been taken, things are wrong. Things are going very wrong. So somebody has to be accountable for this. I absolutely believe that Kristi Noem should be impeached over this. But oversight, accountability, and justice is what we need. They must stop running over our Constitution. They absolutely need to be giving people due process, and they need to stop lying about what's happening.
Okay, let's move into questions more about you. So you talk about yourself as a mountain Democrat raised by a teacher and a coal miner in Eastern Kentucky. Why do you think it's important to identify as a mountain Democrat in this specific district, and what does this identity bring to the table?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I think being a mountain Democrat is about, but I would encourage all of you to go to my social media and check out. We've been doing a mountain Democrat listening tour, and so we're asking people, what does being a mountain Democrat mean to you? And so they're fixing signs and holding those up, and we've got a lot of different pictures about that. So I encourage you to go look at what they think. But for me, it is about a set of values. Being a mountain Democrat isn't necessarily about where you live, but it's about what lives in your heart. I come from a place where people that mined coal built America. They built the railroads and the roads that connected communities. At some point, they got tired of living in the company town and owning the company store, and they decided that they were going to organize, stand up, fight back, and they won. And it is absolutely time that we do that now, because we are living in a time when billionaires and millionaires are ruling our Congress. They're dominating everything that we're doing here. And we and you are getting left behind. So I talk a lot about the fact that right now we are far, far past red versus blue. It's about billionaires versus you. So know that being a mountain Democrat for me is about the values that I learned on front porches, in union halls, at church suppers, and around kitchen tables. And that those things value community and fairness and protecting your neighbors. A whole group of people, unfortunately, could not always depend on the paychecks that were coming out of those coal mines. But you better believe that they always made sure that their neighbor who had less had enough. And that is what being a mountain Democrat is for me.
Okay, final question. I'm going to abbreviate it so you can answer it. But in summary, you've talked a lot about healthcare along the campaign trail. So it's obviously been under immense attack by the Trump administration, gutted from all sides. And we have an issue with affordable healthcare, but we can't have affordable healthcare without our frontline workers. So if elected to Congress, what specific actions would you champion to sustain our healthcare industry, our frontline workers, and also to keep care accessible?
Well, care must be more affordable, first and foremost. Every single person deserves access to quality and affordable health care, and right now we just saw 40,000 Kentuckians choose not to renew their health care through the Connect system because premiums had gone way too high. So that is absolutely what we must address. Affordability in the healthcare industry, within our pharmaceutical industry, and we absolutely should have a public option. We need to be incentivizing healthcare workers as well. So, if you want to be a nurse, then that's fine. You can come to school. And then a hospital should say, hey, come work for us, and we're going to help you pay off those student loans. There are all kinds of things that we need to be doing so that we can boost our healthcare system. Unfortunately, coming from Eastern Kentucky, it's a place that we know is a healthcare desert. So we need to be incentivizing doctors, nurse practitioners, and PAs to go there, to work, to go back there, to go home, to work for those things, because we know right now, one quick thing, fewer than half of our 120 counties have an OBGYN. We absolutely have a healthcare provider shortage in this state, and the decisions that are coming out of Washington and Frankfurt are only making it worse.
Okay, thank you. Caroline Petrie. Okay. Do you want the repeat of the question too?
Why not? Yeah, let's keep
Okay.
it consistent. Let's have a refresh for the audience too.
As we mentioned 7 times, but Trump wouldn't remember the 8th.
It's a hoax.
Trump can't fathom affordability, and college students are feeling the brunt of this horrendous mistake. That said, what does affordability look like for young people to you?
Yeah, affordability is not just a buzzword, right? It's the reality for, I would say, everyone in this room, right? Whether it is healthcare, whether it is education, whether it is housing, whether it is basic goods and services, like going to the grocery store or getting a prescription medication. Now, I graduated at the height of the recession back in 2009. So I've seen how we have not done well before for our young people, especially fresh graduates. And here's the thing, is that we are in a situation where all of our politicians are essentially bought and paid for by the corporations who are benefiting the most from keeping these prices out of reach and holding us all hostage by that. Which is why, if elected to Congress, let's talk about housing affordability first. Number 1, I would propose legislation that bans venture capital and private equity from being able to own single-family homes. I would call to task all of those short-term rental companies, which, yes, I know sometimes it's fun to get a cabin, but Airbnb and Vrbo, they're incentivizing investors to go into upcoming neighborhoods and buy up all of the affordable housing, ones that y'all could have been buying, in order to enrich investors' pocketbooks. I would also work to incentivize cities that work to rapidly accelerate rezoning, as well as accelerate permitting for affordable housing and new construction. Now, when it comes to healthcare, we have to pass Medicare for all and universal healthcare. How are we the richest nation on this planet and people still risk going to the doctor and potentially ending up in bankruptcy? That is unacceptable, it's unconscionable, and I will support universal healthcare at every turn. But then let's talk about also the billionaires, right? The people say, well, Erin, how are you gonna pay for that, right? How are you gonna pay for universal health care? How are you gonna pay for making sure that, we have affordable housing? Well, it's simple, because there's a significant amount of people out there who are making a lot of money and not paying their fair share into the system. So I would absolutely work to massively reform the tax code to ensure that billionaires are paying their fair share and that corporations are doing the exact same. But you can't talk about all of that until you also talk about wages. Because we have had such severe wage stagnation in this country for far too long. $7.25 is the minimum wage, including in the state of Kentucky, which is the equivalent to almost $11 in today's spending capacity. 14,000 Kentuckians are still making minimum wage. We have to not just work towards increasing the federal minimum wage, but also to ensure that we have prevailing wages restored for our union workers who are doing work on government contracts, and then work towards a living wage. We all just want to be able to live a good life, but we have to be able to afford to do so. And companies, I've worked for some of the biggest, y'all. I've worked at the Amazons, and they will pay you as little as possible and give you as few benefits as possible, unless there's something in it for them. And we have to tell them what that floor is, otherwise they will continue to dive deeper and deeper. And our workers and our people, and especially our young college students coming out with new education, they deserve better.
Speaking of college students.
Oh, speaking of,
Yes.
yes.
As we previously mentioned, higher education institutions are struggling to navigate free speech and DEI under the Trump administration. So, at that point, what measures should be taken to protect our students' rights and their ability to flourish on our college campuses?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the First Amendment is first for a reason, right? Because, remember, the British wanted to shut us down. They wanted to remove the papers that were being, they said seditious, right, against the British colonial rule. That is the foundation. Freedom of speech, the ability to question each other's ideas, the ability to do this right here. That is the foundation of a strong, vibrant, and sustainable democracy. And that all starts with progress. And progress is achieved in halls like this, in university campuses and in classrooms. I have one of my old professors here as well. I'm sure we've gotten into a lot of different arguments and he's tested my view of the world for the better. And there's a reason that all of the major flashpoints in our recent history occurred on college campuses like this one. Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and right now. And we will continue to value that. And I will continue to fight for that because that is who we are. And talking about DEI, DEI is one of these things that people say, oh, well, that's just giving people an unfair advantage. Well, listen, it's doing, it's giving a level playing field. And people fail to talk about the fact that it actually helps people like from rural Kentucky. It helps people who have disabilities. It helps people who didn't have the money to go to a fancy high school or didn't grow up in a really nice zip code to have a fair shot.
So you mentioned that we're in a current movement right now, and so that's going to move into immigration. Again, how can Congress reform immigration enforcement to balance public safety, protect civil rights, and maintain trust in our communities?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been very outspoken about this issue, right? So I mean, essentially, I have 4 main things that need to happen. Number 1, we must abolish ICE. We must do this. It is a paramilitary organization that is full of armed-to-the-hilt goon squads patrolling our streets. For what purpose? Because this administration has created a goon, like a boogeyman out of immigrants. And I'm like, no, it's our system that has failed to create jobs, not immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. I'm sure everybody got their 23andMe or Ancestry.com and loves to say where they're from originally. But here's the thing. We must abolish it because it no longer has trust. We cannot trust what ICE is. And ICE does lead to people getting stuck in the system. And people, even when they come here the right way, people still get stuck. And that is why I'm also calling for an immediate end to the 287G programs that essentially deputize our local police departments to go into our communities and trying to do these ICE raids. And by the way, in this district, Clark County, Scott County, and Montgomery County all have those with our police departments. So they are doing that right here, putting our own police officers at risk. But not only do we need to abolish ICE, we also need to call for a pause, a 365-day pause on routine ICE enforcement to ensure that we are working out this system in the appropriate way, and it's not just being used as a political tool. Then we must investigate and prosecute to the fullest extent of the law every single person who is complicit in this horrendous attack on our Constitution and to the murders of Alex Preddy, Renee Nicole Good, and all of the countless others who have died at the hands of this administration. We need to give people a real path to citizenship. We need to actually make sure that it's accessible, it's affordable, because these people want to work, they want to be part of our society, because this used to be the gleaming beacon on the hill. And I want to turn that light back on again.
Okay. Along the campaign trail, you describe yourself as the only progressive candidate in Kentucky's 6th district. What does it mean to be a progressive Democrat, and how is that shaping your approach to representing Kentucky's 6th district?
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, progressivism means a lot of things, but it also tells you immediately what I stand for. A living wage, banning corporate contributions to political campaigns, and putting clear political spending caps on campaigns. That has been empirically proven to reduce incumbency in a lot of races in other countries, so it does work. Also, it means banning private prisons. No one should be profiting over incarcerating another human. It means believing in climate change. It also means making sure that we are continually working for the people, doing things like universal health care. and actually showing up for people as a government should, for the people, not for profits and corporations.
Okay, you rank energy and climate, it's listed like second on
Exactly.
your website, so we're going to talk about that. You advocate for affordable energy and the transition to a diverse, renewable energy system. We're curious to know how you would implement these policies and not pass off the cost onto low and middle income households and also our historically dependent coal communities.
Yeah, so zooming out, right? Our biggest national security threat is our energy system, right? The wars of the future are not going to be fought with bullets, but with bytes and watts, right? We already lost a huge aluminum smelting plant in northeastern Kentucky to Oklahoma because we could not provide the right kind or enough energy for that plant. Jobs gone because of that. And let's talk about coal. I actually wrote a really long article about that a few weeks ago. The coal-dependent communities here are never those jobs aren't gonna come back. They've been sold false promises and false bills of goods, but we can revitalize the supply chain around the renewable energy transition. We can put jobs back in those communities, and ones that don't lead them to having black lung or being put at safety risk because the companies don't want to do what the Department of Labor says. But that's the thing, is that we also must, with data centers, for example, if they want to come into a community, they have to foot part of the bill for the utilities as well, and that's how we will make sure that it's not put off on those communities. But also, the truth is, renewable energy, carbon-free energy such as nuclear, is immensely cheaper, not just to build, but to operate, as well as it shows up on your utility bill, than fossil fuels. So it's not just a climate play, it just makes economic sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Zach Dembo.
Y'all remember the questions at this point? I won't make you go through it again if that's okay, Caroline. The first question about affordability and what it means to you all and what I think it should mean to students. The first thing I think what I want to talk about is what it's not, and then I want to end on a positive note in terms of what it is. What it is not is this Congress allowing the administration to put tariffs on everything, which are just taxes passed to us. I don't know if y'all saw, but they're estimating that in 2025, those tariffs cost every household and all of us in here $1,000 extra. In this year, 2026, they're guessing it's gonna be $1,500. And most people I know weren't exactly flush to begin with, and this is a completely unnecessary tax that's being passed on to us. Another thing that affordability does not look like to me are massive tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, in exchange for which we are getting our Medicaid cut and our rural hospitals at risk. The good thing is, it's an easy solution. The reason these things are happening is because Congress, for the first time in recorded history, has just laid down and decided it's gonna give up its Article I powers to an out-of-control White House. That's an easy fix. We have to flip the House. That starts right here in this district, and all it takes is Congress saying, you know what? Actually, in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it says Congress gets to decide tariffs. So we're the ones who are going to decide what's good and not good for the economy. We're going to make sure you're not taxing the American people. Now, on a more positive note, let's talk about what affordability is. I'm very fortunate in that I had student loans that were forgiven under a program that allows you to serve in public service for 10 years, after which they're forgiven. When I was graduating from law school, I was very proud to wear the uniform, but I'll be honest and say I was making probably a third to less of what many of my colleagues were making who went to fancy law firms in New York. And it was an honor to do it. I don't know that I could have done it financially if it weren't for this program that told me if I do 10 years, it will be forgiven. I'll also share my lovely wife, Lindsay, who's in the audience. We're still paying on her student loans. And so I know very much the debt that you all take on. I think it should be expanded, like the program that I was in, to give more student loan forgiveness to people who serve their communities. I also think that a lot of these private loan servicers are predatory. They have interest rates that are unsustainable, and they need to be tightly regulated instead of what's happening right now, which is the Department of Education essentially being gutted and corporations being allowed to do whatever they want. Same thing with housing. It should not be out of reach for someone in their 20s or 30s to buy a house. I'm, again, fortunate that we were able to buy a house only because I qualified for a VA loan from serving in the military. Again, if I didn't have that benefit, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But we need more programs like that to incentivize first-time home buyers, to reward people who serve their communities, and to put it within reach. That's what affordability looks like to me. It's an easy fix because what we need to do is just have a Congress that cares about us and an administration that believes affordability is a real thing and not a hoax. The next question, I believe, was about college campus and free speech. I swore an oath to the Constitution 4 times, and I also prosecuted people who deprive folks of their constitutional rights, including of their First Amendment rights. This is very personal to me. And again, I think the obvious solution here is the Department of Justice, my old workplace and a place that I revered up until recently, needs to be working for us and not pushing a political agenda. You know, I think the question mentioned the Civil Rights Act, which is another thing that I assisted in enforcing. What they're doing right now is clearly not only against the Constitution and the plain language of the statute, but as you've probably seen, court after court has been throwing it out, and the problem is Congress is just not calling the administration out on it. And that's, again, why we just have to flip the House, because right now, no one in DC is standing up for us, and it always makes sense for a local institution like the University of Kentucky to decide what's best for its student body. We do not need the DOJ in its current terrible form that I had to resign from coming down and telling us what we should or shouldn't be saying. That's the beginning of the end of these constitutional rights that I hold so dear. The third question was about ICE. I served the taxpayers for 11 years. I was tasked with keeping the taxpayers safe. I worked alongside federal law enforcement. So let me tell you, it is personal to me how appalling what ICE is doing is, how against the mission of any federal law enforcement agency it is, how when you have an agency designed to make us feel safe and to serve the taxpayer, it's making us feel scared and it's killing taxpayers. And then to make it worse, my old division in DC, the Civil Rights Division, which normally would investigate law enforcement misconduct, as I did when I was there, is being told they're not even going to look into it. Part of the problem here, again, is that Congress is just allowing it to happen. And I really hope that they wake up and realize that we have to overhaul ICE from top to bottom, starting with firing Kristi Noem, all the way down to retraining and making sure that this agency that's run amok in our streets is held accountable and to the standards that all federal law enforcement should be.
Okay. Well, I'm going to extrapolate from some of the things that you referred to. I want to talk about corruption, because you talk about that in your story about why you're running for office. So you served under both Trump administrations. We're curious to know what motivated you to stay under the first administration, and then what was the straw that broke the camel's back to make you leave in the second administration? And if you want to tackle this, what's a policy that you would advocate for that is for anti-corruption in Congress?
Sure. So I served on active duty under President Obama. I served as a career civil servant under the first Trump administration. I served as a career civil servant under President Biden. And then finally, under this second Trump administration, that's when I decided I had to resign. The reason none of those mattered in terms of the politics of it was it never even occurred to me until this administration that something going on in the White House in DC would affect my day-to-day as a prosecutor. And the reason it never occurred to me is because that has not happened since the 1970s, since Watergate. After Watergate, they put up a well-developed separation between the Department of Justice and the White House that held firm even through the first Trump administration. So while I got hired before Trump got elected, when I came on, I was worried as to whether the mission would still be allowed to proceed. But when I was prosecuting folks, and again, most of these defendants were law enforcement who were committing egregious misconduct, I never once had any decision reversed in the first administration. Every decision followed the law and the evidence and was a just outcome. Now, I was very strongly, personally, in disagreement with the administration, as were many of my colleagues. But there is a long and storied history of apolitical public service in the federal civil service and the military. And that's one that I was proud to be a part of. It would never occurred to me that I should abandon my duty to the American people and the Constitution just because I didn't like who was in the White House. The thing that changed is when this administration came in, they started altering decisions that career prosecutors were making. Eric Adams, also a Democrat, couldn't matter to me less as to whether or not we're the same party, but he was the mayor of New York. DOJ had a very righteous public corruption case against him, but this administration overruled all of its career prosecutors and said, you know what, we're gonna dismiss this righteous public corruption case so we can get political leverage on this guy. The DOJ said it was legal for the president to accept a $700 million private jet from the government of Qatar, when I was being told every year that if I accepted more than $20 in gifts from a prohibited source, I could be in trouble. Those sorts of things told me this is not a normal government, this is not a normal DOJ, and my principals said that I had to resign. Sorry, the anti-corruption question, easy one. Congress should not be allowed to trade individual stocks based on non-public information, and congressmen should have a lifetime ban on lobbying, not just 1 year.
Okay, great. Another issue that we've seen you talk a lot about is international affairs, and for many Kentuckians, that relationship between what goes on out there and here doesn't really click. With this disconnect in mind, how do you see foreign affairs affecting Kentuckians the most, and what policies would you think alleviate these impacts?
We're all global citizens. I don't think Kentucky is any different from any other part. All of us care about people abroad, all of us care about the reputation of America abroad, and all of us want to be responsible citizens in the global community, and I think everyone in here understands that. What's happening right now is an embarrassment. Our reputation and our rule and our rule-based order that we created after World War II is in shambles, and unfortunately, our reputation as a moral leader in the world is in shambles. It can be fixed, we have to fix it, but I think that matters to everyone in Kentucky and everyone in America, and that's something that we have got to change.
Okay, thank you so much. Round of applause. We're gonna move into audience questions, and Zach, if you feel comfortable, we'll just go reverse order. I know you just spoke for 10 straight minutes, but these are from our lovely audience, and I love these. Thank you so much. You'll each get a minute to answer this question. The first one is, Congress is highly divided right now. Ain't that the truth? Can you name one issue where you'd be willing to work across party lines, and give a specific example of how you would do that, if you can?
Sure. Look, I don't think anyone in Kentucky wakes up thinking whether they're Democrat or Republican, at least I certainly don't. I care about policies, and in my mind, we're the best when we're doing big things. I'm a New Deal Democrat, I'm a Great Society Democrat, I'm a War on Poverty Democrat. There are big ideas that we can get folks behind. I think an obvious one that used to be popular would have been the idea of reducing the deficit, which I think is a huge concern. Republicans used to love that. They used to always talk about reducing the deficit. Then they passed this tax cut bill and they added $1 trillion to it. If there are any Republicans still in Congress who believe in reducing the deficit, I'll work with them. On foreign affairs, there used to be Republicans, and as a matter of fact, the president used to claim he didn't believe getting involved in foreign wars. We need responsible oversight over our military and foreign affairs so that, for example, this nonsense that happened in Venezuela, that I think has serious implications, has oversight and is stopped. And I hope there are still some Republicans who feel that way. I think there's a lot we can get together on if you can break through the fear and frankly the cowardice that a lot of people in Congress have.
Thank you.
I was like, hey, wait.
Well, I'm just gonna go reverse because we've got multiple, so we'll just go back down.
That's even better.
Okay, I'll repeat it again. Congress is highly divided. What is an example of where you'd be willing to work across party lines?
Well, I spent 6 years in our General Assembly serving in a super duper minority. So working in a bipartisan fashion was something that we had to do in order to get anything accomplished. And I am really proud of the bipartisan work that I did that helps do things like deliver medical cannabis, give Kentucky sports wagering, putting a cap on insulin costs. It's about relationships. And the very first thing that I will do when I get to Congress is I will be willing to work with anyone, absolutely anyone, who is willing to get our health care back on track. We saw a bill that we've all been fighting against that is pulling $1 trillion out of our health care, which is the biggest cut to health care in our nation's history. And we all know that we here in Kentucky are the state that's going to be hurt the hardest with the Medicaid cuts. We have 35 hospitals that are in
That's time. You can wrap up your last thought, but
that are in danger of closing, and that is going to be a huge snowball for all of our rural communities, and we've got to get everyone health care.
thank you.
So I've worked almost my whole career in the private sector, like building ports, building facilities. Most of that time I was either working in the United States South, we're talking Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, or I was working in the Middle East. Let me just say, these are not liberal people, all right? So I'm very used to getting things done when folks on the other side of the table don't necessarily think in the same ways that I do, right? But the number one thing right now that I'm seeing the most bipartisan support on is massive permitting reform around energy, notably on the nuclear issue. Rand Paul has even talked about this at length. Nuclear energy is affordable, it is carbon-free, it creates a lot of jobs. It actually even uses metallurgical coal for actually building some of those reactor pieces. So that is part of that transition. But it will provide so much more capacity for our system, bring in jobs, and help us solve one of the most existential crises that we are going to be having in our near future.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, guys. So as you heard, everyone here is willing to work across the aisle. So that's not a distinguishing characteristic. What I will say is that we all have different ideas on how we're going to do it. We're going to base it off of our experience. We're going to base it off of what we've done in the past. I served in a nonpartisan capacity at the local city government, but just because it's a nonpartisan election doesn't mean people leave that at the door. You have to work with people with very different ideas. When I'm talking about getting something done, like addressing the affordable housing issue, addressing healthcare, or addressing something like jobs and wages, I'm going to speak directly to the constituents of those people across the aisle, because that's how we're actually going to get it done. When you're talking to a person in just Washington, you can sit there and be philosophical all you want, but when you start talking to the people that they represent and to the issues that they care about, that's when you get bipartisan bills passed. So I'm going to address these issues by talking not just to the people in Washington, but to the people in their communities.
That's time. Thank you. And we can start with you again if you're comfortable taking.
Zipper.
Yeah, we'll just go back and forth.
All right.
Okay. What legislative approach would you advocate for when it comes to artificial intelligence and its potential to transform and disrupt labor and economic landscape?
So I'm going to start by saying that this new technological revolution of AI is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen in our lifetimes. And this is coming from someone who grew up in the tech industry, who has built up many, many tech companies over the years. This is different. This is bigger than the internet. This is going to change pretty much everything about the way we interact with each other and the world around us. That means we're going to need some kind of guidelines, some kind of rules, and people who understand how much this is going to impact us need to be in those positions. Right now, the average age of the Science, Technology, and Space Committee is, we'll say 70s to be generous. And these are the people who are making these rules. What we need is to make sure that we have a guideline that sets us forward into the future, that's going to protect people where they are. And I'll say, down the line, we're going to have to move to a UBI system because AI is going to very much displace and change our entire jobs market.
Okay, thank you.
My last role before I ran for Congress was helping Amazon Web Services improve the sustainability of their data centers because of the huge influx of AI and generative AI. I've seen it firsthand from the inside. Now, one of the things with AI, though, that I do believe is that so many companies are over-indexing on its potential. See, AI is a tool, it's not a solution. But so many are looking at it as a panacea, as a cure-all. Number one thing that we do have to do is make sure that there is a responsible code of conduct for AI that every single company that is utilizing AI uses, that is related to jobs, misinformation and disinformation, and banning the disgusting things that are happening on Grok right now. The other thing is we also need to handle the climate side of it, right? Because we are seeing land taken up by data centers that don't produce jobs. We are seeing utility rates increase because of that. We need to mandate efficiency standards for all data centers that are using AI. We also need to mandate mandatory like SEC style reporting on emissions and other things that actually come out of the data center so that
That's time.
Yeah, great.
Well, yes.
Yes.
But also, we absolutely have to have some oversight and regulation. We have been living in a world where we have heard deregulation, 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 but this is absolutely an area that needs oversight. It's really hard to legislate ethics and morality, but this is an issue where we absolutely have to find a way to make this happen. But also, we need to be sure that there is still human oversight. For instance, in the General Assembly, we had a bill about driverless vehicles, right? And about the fact that we were going to allow tractor trailers to be driven on their own and without a human driver or without a human oversight on that. And we even tried to be sure that they could say that it couldn't be school buses because we didn't want to risk our children. And the GOP would not even talk about that. So that is absolutely something that we have to have. I'm really worried about the misinformation that we're seeing. I'm worried about the way that this could play out in our elections. But I also know that labor, and I am a very good friend of labor, and labor is a friend to me, they are against this, and we cannot risk losing too many jobs.
Thank you.
AI is going to transform a lot of things, but there's a way in which it's an old story, which is corporations are looking to screw the rest of us. This has been going on for many years, and this is one where I'm worried again with deregulation and with this government just selling regulation to the highest bidder, that these AI companies are going to be able to earn benefits off of our backs. So for example, if there's a data center going in, Congress, as well as all the other regulating authorities, need to make sure that we don't get stuck with the higher utility bills and the higher water bills. That's something we should make them pay for. If we're worried about jobs going out, and I think it's very likely they will, we need to change the tax structure so that these corporations that are benefiting from it are going to help us find jobs for them and give some sort of compensation to these folks who are being screwed over by these corporations. No matter what, the government's job is to make sure there's a square deal between corporations and workers,
That's
and it's
time.
shirking those duties right now.
Okay, and if you want to stay standing, you
Sure.
can field the last audience question, which I love this from the audience. We're all Democrats up here, but what is your plan to flip the 6th?
First of all, it is eminently doable, and I hope you all know that, right? My old boss, Governor Beshear, won this district by 20 points. 20 points. Now, I only need 0.1, so I'm not as worried about it, but it is doable for all you who are listening out there. But what we need is a new face and new ideas, and we need someone who's running for public service and not as a career politician. I think we need new ideas and new faces, as I said in the beginning. And so what I bring to the table is being the only veteran, the only prosecutor, the only person who worked for Governor Beshear, and the only person who was a teacher. All of those inform how I look at this, and this is not just another political rung in a ladder for me. This is about serving you all and fighting for you all, and that's why I think I'm best situated to flip this seat.
Thank you.
Well, I served 6 years in our General Assembly, and it was a district that had never ever been held by a Democrat or a woman. And I flipped that seat by a whopping 48 votes because we had boots on the ground every single day, meeting voters where they are, talking to them on their front porch, and addressing their issues, and listening more than we talk. I want to know what's keeping you awake at night, but also what are the hopes and dreams for your future, for your family's future, and speaking directly to those. We have a plan to absolutely flip the 6th Congressional District. As Zach said, it is absolutely doable. I am the only person that has experience in this race of running for a seat that's long held by Republicans and flipping it. I'm the only one that has weathered the nasty and divisive politics that unfortunately dominate our elections today, and I'm the only one that has already stood on a legislative floor and fought back against MAGA Republicans. If you want a fighter in DC, I'm someone who fought to flip a district, I fought to keep a district, and I fought the GOP every single day for 6 years. You want a fighter in DC? I'm your girl.
Well, I mean, I think the main thing, right, is it's going to take every single one of us, and it's going to take every single one of us getting every single person we know to get out to the polls. Because you know what votes don't count? The ones that aren't cast. So we have to make sure that we are restoring the value of the individual vote. And we need to tell people that your vote does matter. And that's why I'm the only candidate who has publicly said, I'm not taking corporate money, that I'm not beholden to special interests. Because I care about trying to restore this democracy back to the people, because corporations and billionaires really are running this country, and that is not okay. Now, I was a teacher, actually, but I am also the only person up here who has created hundreds of jobs in the United States South in manufacturing, in technology. I have exported hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. goods and services overseas, creating jobs for veteran, minority, women, and indigenous-owned businesses. And we do need fresh faces and fresh voices and fresh leadership, because the Democratic Party was not up to the task. That's time. Well, there we go.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know that I'm a huge fan of this particular question, in that it's pitted all of us against each other, saying we're the only ones who did a thing. I know that I've created many, many jobs. I know that I've had limited opportunities to teach and give lectures before. I know that I've served in a legislative body here, right in Fayette County. But those experiences aren't why I'm going to be the one who's going to flip this district. I can flip this district because when I talk to people, I talk to them, not at them. I talk about what matters to them. And when I go to my church or I go out to the grocery store, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. My policies apply. Because we're talking about what it means to be a person living in Central Kentucky and what our needs are. It doesn't matter if you can get past being dismissed as a Democrat. I'm sure you guys have felt that in the world out there, being dismissed, especially in Kentucky. You can get past that by connecting with a person on an individual level. And that's why I'm the best candidate to flip the 6th.
Thank you. Okay, we've made it to the end. Thank you for staying so far. For closing statements, you're going to get 1 minute again, but we do have an order for this one. We're going to go Sherilyn, Zach, David, and Aaron. So this is your sales pitch.
Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. There's 100 other places that you could have been, and you chose to be here with us, and I very much appreciate that. And thank you so much to the College Dems for putting this on and creating this opportunity for us. I want to be your next U.S. representative. I want to be your voice in Frankfort. And as young people, your voices matter. Do not let anyone tell you that they don't. And if you want a representative that listens to you, then know that you always will have a place in my office. You can have my phone number. I give it out to everybody. Call, text me anytime. I believe in young Democrats. 2/3 of my staff are young Democrats. So much so that I believe, and I know that you all are so tired of hearing that you're our future, but you are. You absolutely are. And we are depending on you, and we are asking all of you to give us your time, your talents, and your treasure to help us flip the 6th.
Thank you. Zach.
I started by thanking the College Democrats in UK, but I want to thank the most important person in the room, which is certainly not me, it's you. The news coming out of DC is depressing, it is maddening, it is hurtful, it can make you feel helpless. And what I'll share with you is, when I resigned from DOJ, I felt that way too. I would read these headlines and think, what can I do? And some of you all in here may already know this, but since I've gotten in this race, I always have an answer to that question, what can I do? And the answer is, I'm gonna stand up and fight for this district and my friends, families, and neighbors. I hope that the energy you all bring by being here tonight sustains you, and that you have an answer to that question too, because we are gonna need every single one of you and everyone else you can get on board. I'm just one person, but with you all and the team that we can build, we can show this state and the nation what we can do in this district and what Kentuckians can do when we work together. I hope I can have your support, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. David.
So I have two kids, 14 and 16, and they're getting ready to go out into the world and look at colleges and all that fun stuff. And I'm here before you today because I don't want the world they're going to be inheriting to be left in the state I see it in now. Public service. It's about giving back. It's about listening. It's about working to make things better. That's why I'm here. And I'm not asking you to take my values and say they have to be yours. I'm not asking you to take, my fight and just believe it wholesale. I'm going to put out every single one of my plans. You can vet it yourself. They are concrete, simple, common sense plans that have been built with the help of people in the community and experts around the world in order to make sure that when we get somebody into Congress, and hopefully it's me, that we have these solutions ready to go. Because we don't have the time to build the plane while we're flying in it. We got to make sure that we're taking steps forward before we even get there. So I hope you all will lend your support to me. I'm asking for your support for this seat. I hope to be your next representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron.
Between everybody and dinner. The news cycle these days can feel really rough. Really rough. But you know what? I see this time as such an incredible opportunity for us to rebuild and remake this country, this state, the Democratic Party, into what we truly can be. The best versions of ourselves, the one that cares for our neighbors and cares for other people, and one where the world looks back at us and says, yeah, they're doing it right. I'm Erin Petrie, and I'm standing on a platform of affordability, access, and opportunity for all. Because this state, this town, this country, this university made me who I am and gave me such incredible hope. And I want to use every ounce of that hope to fight for you so that we can make the American dream the American reality again. And I hope that I can count on your support on May 19th at the polls. My name is Erin Petrie, and thank you so much for your time. We're gonna flip this district, right? Yeah? Come on, Leslie, come on. There we go. Thank you all so much, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.
What a night. This has been so fantastic. Can we give all of these wonderful candidates a round of applause? Thank you all so much for being here. It means the absolute world to us. Listen, I just read a statistic. Democrats flipped 21% of GOP held seats in 2025. And as Erin said and everyone else on the stage, we are going to flip the 6th this November. And it could not be without the help of each and every one of you all getting informed and helping support our incredible candidates up and down the ballot, truly. As we conclude, there's literature out with all the candidates' information, so get connected with these candidates, and before the candidates leave, we can snap a quick photo. And otherwise, thank you all so much for your time this evening. You are loved, know that you belong, and we're so excited to have you all continue to see our work here at the College Democrats of Kentucky. So thank you all.
Look.